So in this video, I would like to explain comparative and superlative adjectives in Russian. Comparative and superlative adjectives explain the differences or comparisons between nouns by comparing one noun to a different noun. First, there are comparative adjectives that are simply taken from normal adjectives, and a few easy methods can be used to put them in context. The first method of comparatives is a bit lazy, but still, it uses the words more, less, and then, which in Russian are более, менее, and чем. Even though чем is a question that the instrumental answers, it means then in the context of comparatives. Nonetheless, when comparing adjectives using this first method, we put the words более or менее before any normal adjective to show the comparison, so there are no exceptions. The normal adjective also modifies its gender, case, and plurality, depending on the noun. Here are a few examples. Более красивый стол and менее красивый стол will be a more beautiful table and a less beautiful table. In this case, we're putting более and менее in the beginning. The normal adjective красивый stays in the masculine, and then we put the noun in the end. But it doesn't always have to be in the end. We can say sentences like, this table is more or less beautiful than that one. Этот стол более or менее красивый, чем тот. We have two full sentences along with the conjunction чем, meaning then, placed after the adjective and following a comma. This is one way to utilize comparatives in Russian. In this case, более and менее are placed before the normal adjective. The adjective matches the case, gender, and plurality, and we put чем with a comma after the adjective. Also, the last word, tot, is the masculine way of saying that one, and it can change depending on gender, case, and plurality. Here's another example. Более новая машина and менее новая машина. A more new car and a less new car. In English, we have to say a newer car, but because we're comparing it to Russian, try to think of it as more new. Более and менее are placed in the beginning, but the normal adjective changes the gender for the feminine noun машина, and it's something we cannot forget. Here are two useful phrases. This car is more or less new or newer than that one. Эта машина более or менее новая, чем та. Once again, we're using the conjunction чем placed after the adjective and following a comma. The comparison in the end, ta, is the feminine way of saying that one, in the nominative. Here's another example. Более старое здание and менее старое здание. A more old or older building and a less old building. Более and менее are placed in the beginning, but the normal adjective changes the gender for the neuter noun, здание. Here are two useful phrases. This building is more or less old or older than that one. Это здание более or менее старое, чем то. We use the conjunction чем by placing it after the adjective and following a comma. The comparison in the end, to, is the neuter way of saying that one. Finally, here is a plural example. Более важные документы and менее важные документы. More important documents and less important documents. Более and менее are placed in the beginning, but the normal adjective becomes plural, regardless of the noun's gender. Here are two useful phrases. These documents are more or less important than those. Эти документы более or менее важные, чем те. We're using the conjunction чем by placing it after the adjective with a comma. The comparison in the end, те, is the plural way of saying those. All of the sentences that I just showed are acceptable, but they're quite lazy and not used that often, especially when speaking Russian. The formal way of using comparatives is by literally changing the adjectives to not waste time with other words, similar to how English puts the letters ER to simple adjectives like smaller, taller, older, newer, and so on. These comparatives in Russian are formed by dropping the endings of the normal adjectives and supplementing the letters ye or simply ye to the stems of the adjectives. In the first pattern, if the stem of the adjective ends in one of these consonants, N, L, R, P, B, M, or V, we drop the ending of the adjective and add the letters ye to the stem. In the second pattern, we drop the ending and simply put ye, but there could be a few spelling rules. Here are a few examples. Here we have the adjective opasny, which means dangerous. The stem of opasny ends in N. Therefore, we use the first pattern. On opasnее, чем я. He is more dangerous than me. In this case, opasny drops the ending and then adds the ending ye. It's also written in one form, unlike in English, where the adjective is too long and uses more beforehand. Also, we're using чем and putting ya, which acts like an object pronoun. That is me. However, if we used less, in this case, by saying he is less dangerous than me, then the sentence will utilize menie and have the masculine opasny, which will separate the phrase into two words. When using less, both in English and Russian, the pattern is basically the same, and it also applies to any other sentence that there is. Here, we have the adjective milly, which means cute. The stem of milly ends in L, so we use the first pattern. Он милее, чем она. He is cuter than her. Milly drops the ending and gets ye, being written in one form just like in English. It also uses чем and has ona, which is an object pronoun for her. Here we have bystry, meaning fast, whose stem ends in er, making us follow the first pattern. Я быстрее, чем он. I am faster than him. Bystry drops the ending and gets ye in one form, just like in English. Чем is also used, along with on, which is the object pronoun for him. Here we have slabý, meaning weak, and its stem ends in b, following the first pattern. Мы слабее, чем вы. We are weaker than y'all. Slabý drops the ending and gets ye in one form, just like in English. Чем is also used with we, which is the object pronoun for y'all. Here we have nový, meaning new, and its stem ends in v, following the first pattern. Этот телефон новее, чем тот. This phone is newer than that one. Nový drops the ending and gets ye in one form, just like in English. Чем is also used, and tot is the masculine way of saying that one in the nominative. Now here, we have some phrases that follow the second pattern, so the endings of the stems will not matter, but there will be some spelling changes for better sounds when the words are said. Here, we have the adjective большой, meaning big, and because it ends in a consonant that is not present in the first pattern, it will utilize the second pattern. Luckily, большой doesn't have a spelling change. Этот стол больше, чем тот. This table is bigger than that one. Большой drops the ending, gets the simple ending ye, has one form, as in English, and uses чем and tot. However, not all adjectives that have simple stem endings will be like that, because again, there are changes in spellings to make better sounds, kind of like in English, where bigger uses a second b for spelling purposes. In Russian, instead of adding letters, there will be changes to the letters themselves. Here, we have легкий, meaning light as in weight, and because it ends in ka, it will use the second pattern and have a spelling change. Эта коробка легче, чем та. This box is lighter than that one. Легкий drops the ending and gets the simple ending ye, having one form as in English. However, the vowel yo changes to ye and ka changes to che in the comparative, and it's all done for spelling purposes. Here we have дешевый, which means cheap, and even though it ends in v, it follows the second pattern along with an additional letter. Этот телефон дешевле, чем тот. This phone is cheaper than that one. Дешевый drops the ending, gets the simple ending ye, having one form, as in English, changes yo to ye, and adds l after v. Here we have дорогой, meaning expensive, and it follows the second pattern with a spelling change. Этот телефон дороже, чем тот. This phone is more expensive than that one. Дорогой drops the ending and gets ye, but unlike in English, it only has one form and changes ge to je. Finally, we have чистый, meaning clean, and it follows the second pattern with a spelling change. Этот стол чище, чем тот. This table is cleaner than that one. Чистый drops the ending, gets ye, has one form, as in English, but changes se and te to she. This is how the second pattern is used for comparatives in Russian. Moreover, Russian also has irregular comparatives, just like in English, with the words better and worse, which are the comparatives for good and bad. In Russian, the words are хороший and плохой, and their comparatives are лучше and хуже, completely not following the original adjectives. Я лучше, чем он, and он хуже, чем я. I am better than him, and he is worse than me. The two phrases use the comparatives of хороший, плохой, and object pronouns like him and me. Besides these adjectives, there are высокий and низкий, meaning tall and short, and their comparatives are irregular in the spelling. Выше and ниже. In the comparative выше, ша replaces сок, and in the comparative низкий, же replaces зе and ka. Он выше, чем я, and я ниже, чем он. He is taller than me, and I'm shorter than him. The two phrases also use object pronouns like him and me, and practically, there could be more irregulars that you can find. Now, even though I just said that there are two ways of expressing comparatives in Russian, there's actually a third way. Across every example that I gave, I always use the conjunction чем to show the comparison between the nouns. In spoken Russian, it is possible to compare things without the conjunction, meaning that we can omit it. However, by omitting it, we'll have to modify every noun in comparison by putting it in the genitive case. We can say phrases like, I am faster than him, he is worse than me, this phone is more expensive than this phone, and this box is lighter than this box. Even though the second method of comparatives will perfectly work, the spoken method will look like this. Я быстрее его, он хуже меня, этот телефон дороже этого телефона, and эта коробка легче этой коробки. In these sentences, every comparative noun is in the genitive, without the presence of the conjunction. Его and меня are both object pronouns in the genitive, along with этого телефона and этой коробки. The nouns and even demonstrative pronouns are modified. And yes, Russian does modify demonstrative pronouns in the 6 cases. Anyhow, I personally do not wish to explain more on this concept because it can create more confusion than understanding. And even then, this concept is used more when speaking. I would not recommend focusing on this and omitting the conjunction because you have to get a feel for normal adjectives first, and then if you want, you can try to use it in the genitive. At last, there are the superlatives in Russian, which are quite literally the easiest of all adjectives. Superlatives indicate something as the most or least, best or worst, and so on. In English, we use most or least for long adjectives or add the letters est to short adjectives. In Russian, there is no way of adding letters to make a superlative, but it does have the word samый, meaning most, which is placed before any normal adjective to show the comparison. So there are no exceptions. Don't forget that the normal adjective also modifies its gender, case, and plurality. The superlative samый also has to change its gender, case, and plurality. Now in Russian, there is no literal way of using the word least because a superlative statement will use an opposing noun and give an opposite meaning. Still, do not worry about that. What's more useful to know is that Russian does have words like наиболее and наименее, which are formal most and least. However, these superlatives are not really used much, so what you're more likely to see is самый. And to put this word in context, let's use the sentences that I showed at the beginning of the video. Этот стол самый красивый. This table is the most beautiful. In this case, самый and the normal adjective красивый are in the masculine, and just like in English, the phrase самый красивый is split into 2 words, most beautiful. The same process can be done with any adjective, as long as the gender, case, and plurality match. But the phrase can sometimes have one word in English, like in the sentence, "Эта машина самая новая." This car is the newest. Самый and новый now change to самая and новая to match the gender of машина, because it's a feminine noun. Unlike in English, самая новая has two words, as opposed to the newest. It is possible to say most new, but we say newest. Это здание самое старое. This building is the oldest. Самый and старый change to самое and старое to match the gender of здание, which is neuter. Unlike in English, самое старое has two words, as opposed to the oldest. It is possible to say most old, but we say oldest. Эти документы самые важные. These documents are the most important. Самый and важный change to самые and важные to match the plurality, regardless of the noun's gender. In this case, the sentence has two words, самые важные, like in English, most important, and the same process can be done with any adjective and with no exceptions. In conclusion, this is how comparative and superlative adjectives work in Russian.